Roger, you've worked within both the newspaper and the magazine industry. How do you think that print journalism is coping with the changes posed by the digital revolution?
A lot of newspaper companies are doing innovative things online, but they're struggling to find a formula which will sustain both the print version of their publications and the digital offering.
How have the Lancashire Evening Post and Lancashire Life catered to their online audiences?
Magazines are very, like Lancashire Life, are very tactile things. They're products that people want to sit down and thumb through. They're not something that they would read on the internet, not yet anyway. Niche magazines are probably different, where people are just looking for information. I think there's an element of relaxation and entertainment with a county magazine that you wouldn't get necessarily over the internet.
How much training and resources have been put into making Lancashire Life staff web savvy?
A reasonable amount. We've recognised that we need to have a good offering on our website and try and put different things on our website and get interaction with readers going through forums. So a reasonable amount of training, but we still concentrate very much on the print product because that's our primary audience.
As journalists in a digital newsroom have to be multi-skilled and carry more duties, do you think that the quality of work is affected?
I can only assume it is. It's a while since I worked in a newspaper newsroom, but the number of journalists working in newsrooms has been reduced quite dramatically in many places in recent years. And the fact that they're also being required to work in different media streams now means that they must be stretched in some newspaper offices, and that's got to have an effect on the quality of the work that they're able to do.
Do you think that there is still reluctance from print journalists to develop their training and move content online?
I think there used to be. Old gimmers like me were probably quite reluctant to get involved in anything newfangled. But I think the vast majority of journalists these days recognise that the world has changed and they need to change with it. And most newsrooms are run by young people these days who are very media savvy.
What changes have you noticed in terms of how many advertisers are willing to continue putting money into print journalism?
I think part of the digital revolution has been that advertising has moved from print media, particularly newspapers, onto the internet, mainly because it's so much cheaper or it's free. Whereas newspapers used to rely incredibly heavily on certain key audiences, like people who wanted to buy a property, people who wanted a job, people who wanted to advice on where to go out that night, entertainment information, and now find they can get it for free over the internet. And that means that there's been a subsequent decline in the number of advertisers in newspapers, particularly job adverts, which were hugely important to regional newspapers, which virtually shriveled up and died. There's not much of it left now at all.
A new idea for newspapers to make money is for them to use region-specific advertising on their websites, so that advertisers are reaching their local audiences. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's great, so long as the audience is there, and that's why it's important that newspapers do all they can to build up their digital audience. So it's only going to work if they've got the audience there to deliver to the advertiser. So they've got to work really hard at that.
Some newspaper companies are investing in new technology in the hope that by making their papers full of colour, they can keep readers and charge advertisers more. What do you think about that?
I think that happened a while back, to be honest. Most newspapers have colour capacity these days. I think it's a bit old tech, that. I mean, most advertisers will expect to be able to get colour whenever they want and wherever they want, and pay perhaps a slightly premium rate for it. It's something that's happened, and people are just used to it now.
The Independent newspaper is moving buildings to share office space and staff with the Daily Mail in an effort to cut costs. What do you think about this move?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? They're very odd bedfellows, the Independent and the Daily Mail. I hope there's no fights in the newsroom, but I can understand why large media organisations want to share resources, because it cuts costs, and the one thing everybody's interested in at the moment is finding ways of reducing their overheads. It's an interesting way of cutting costs. Two very different newspapers with different philosophies and outlooks on life, but I guess at the end of the day they're just using the same kit.
In America, some newspaper companies distribute their content via electronic devices that people can subscribe to. How do you think this could change the print industry as we know it?
Well, if it caught on, I suppose it could change it entirely, turn it on its head. I still think that there's a demand in this country for a printed product, something that people can, sit down and read at their leisure. I guess if you can get all that on, a piece of flexible screen, that there might be attractions to that, but I think it will take a long time before it actually takes over.
The internet has enabled journalists to do a lot of research in a shorter amount of time, but circulation figures of newspapers and magazines have tended to show a downward trend. From the print journalism perspective, have the positives of the internet outweighed the negatives?
I think so, yeah. It's just the most amazing revolution that we've had in technology ever. So there's been pluses and minuses. I think one of the minuses is that people just Google for information and believe what they read all the time, and that means that a lot of misinformation gets into the print media. But I think the benefits vastly outweigh that, and it's a tremendous research tool as long as you treat it with caution.
Which is a bigger threat to newspapers and magazines, the credit crunch and the drop in advertising, or readers going online?
Well, I guess the readers going online was a threat which existed long before we had the credit crunch. Credit crunch will end eventually, we all hope, but the digital revolution is here to stay, I think. So if it is a threat, I guess it's the digital threat that's the more fundamental.
The government plans to make the internet available to all homes and to have faster internet speeds by 2012. In light of this, what do you anticipate the changes in the industry to be between now and 2012?
Well, I suspect that more and more people will be getting their information over the internet, and fewer people will be getting their information via a newspaper. And that means that we need to work so much harder at making our newspapers relevant and viable. I think the changes that we'll see in the newspaper industry over the next few years will involve big groups breaking up and newspapers returning to their natural home, which was the case many years ago when local entrepreneurs and local people owned local newspapers and were content to have a lower profit margin than some of the bigger groups are demanding. I think in years gone by, local newspapers were owned by local institutions and local businesses, and were almost seen as a social service, providing a service to the local community. I think those days are long gone, but I'd like to think in the next 10 years we might get back to them.
Finally, which do you believe is more likely to come first? Newspapers and magazines going completely online, or major companies giving copies away for free?
Well, that's a hard one to answer. A lot of newspapers are already going free, like Manchester Evening News are distributing free outside their core area, and I think that's been a really smart move on their part. I think there'll be more and more of that going on over the next few years, and I think there's going to be a mixture of the two, really. I think some newspapers will cease to exist, and that will mean that local communities will be getting their local information over the internet rather than through a print product.